Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more turkey patterning, and today we've got another combo that surprisingly enough we've never tried before, but it's one that one of you guys suggested that we test out, so we had to bring it out here and see what it could actually do, because I think there's a decent chance that this particular choke might actually help these shells out some, based on some previous results we've gotten out of it. So I guess we'll see what happens through today's setup. But as for the shells I've got here today, I brought out some of these. These are some Remington Premier Magnum Turkey high velocity shells. They are a 12 gauge, 3-inch, 1 3/4 ounce payload of 4s, moving about 1,300 feet per second. And the Remington turkey shells have been very middle of the road. I don't think we've ever seen a super impressive pattern out of them, but they've always been usable enough. Now I will say I do think the Premier turkeys are a little better than the Nitro turkeys, but still they haven't been anything super outstanding or impressive so far. But what can these ones actually do through today's choke? That's the big question. And as for the setup we've got out here today, I brought out the Remington 1187 with this choke. One of you guys wanted to see this guy, which is the Avian-X Crusher. It's a 665 constriction choke with those Premier turkeys. And this particular Avian-X here has shown some very surprisingly good results with some cheaper budget oriented middle of the road shells before. We've tested some XX shells through this with some fantastic patterns for a budget shell. So can it actually help these Remingtons out any? There's definitely a chance, but I still think it's going to come down to how well the shell is actually loaded and how well that's going to actually perform. But we'll see what it can do through the Avian-X 665 today. But as for the test today, everything is set up the same as usual. I've got the turkey target set up at 40 yards. I've also got the chronograph so we can get our velocity. So let's get you guys a view of this target and take our shot and just see what kind of a pattern we're able to get from the Avian-X 665 with these Remington Premier Turkey 4s here today. Okay, so that shell gave us 1271 through the chrono. The boss claim is 1300, so that's only 29 under that claim. So I think we're pretty close to right where we should be. So looking pretty decent up here as far as our velocity numbers go. But what kind of a pattern was it actually able to give us down there at 40 yards? Let's go check it out and see what we got. Alright, so now we're down here at our 40-yard paper, and this is what we got. And I gotta say, it doesn't look too bad for a Remington shell, that's for sure. We absolutely have a dead bird there all day long, as you can see. That entire turkey paper is covered in shot. And for a lead number 4, that kind of a core area there definitely is not bad. It's more than usable out to 40 yards all day long. Now, I think these shells still show that they are definitely not a fantastic turkey shell as soon as we get off of that turkey paper. As you can see, we have kind of some strings up there at the top, over across on the left, some pellets all the way at the very bottom edge of the paper down there, and some more strings off to the right. As we back up and look at the whole thing again here, you can definitely see that we have a pretty nice looking core area around that bird on the actual turkey paper, but everything outside of that is very all over the place and sporadic. So this is another 50-50 pattern where some of it is really nice and some of it is not really nice. But I will say that for a Remington Premier Magnum turkey shell, and probably for a Remington turkey shell in general, or at least the lead turkey shells they make, that might be one of, if not the best patterns we've gotten out of them. So I definitely think that Avian-X Crusher does tend to help out some of these cheaper, more basic budget type of shells, because this is not the first time we've seen that. We've seen it do some pretty good things with the XX shells and the Super X shells and stuff like that before as well. So I definitely think that that choke helped these shells out a lot today, but they're still right on the edge of that struggle, if that makes any sort of sense. That is a more than good enough pattern that I wouldn't be scared to hunt with if that's what I had to work with. But I think I would like to test a few more shells to see how consistent that pattern is. If our core can stay looking like it is right now on that turkey paper, it's definitely not bad. But I'm not a fan of the outside edges of the pattern, that's for sure. But still, for a lead 4 and a pretty cheap Remington lead 4, I don't think we can complain too much about that pattern. Sure, it's far from perfect, but we've seen way worse out of these shells, that's for sure. So I guess I'll leave this one up to you guys. I like what I see on the turkey paper, but outside of that, on the actual patterning board, not a huge fan of it. But I guess at the end of the day, it is a more than usable turkey pattern out at 40 or 45 yards all day long, that if that's all you had to work with, then yeah, you could absolutely take it out and hunt turkeys with it, that's for sure. So not perfect, but far from terrible at the same time. Okay, and here's the wad out of that shell, and as you can see, very typical Remington wad. Definitely nothing fancy. They do have these little ribs down the inside of each of the petals, and I think it's probably pretty much the same wad they use in most of their shells, even down to the buckshot shells. This is a very common wad that we see for Remington stuff. And going through that Avian-X choke that is ported and does have straight rifling in it, it definitely beat it up just a little bit. We definitely have some pinholes and stuff, but no major damage, no petals ripped off or anything like that. It looks very much like what I would expect to see out of this wad going through that choke. So pretty basic here, definitely nothing too fancy to take note of, and I think it did about as good as what it could have done with today's combination. All right, y'all. Well, what did you think about that pattern right there? I really like what's on the actual turkey paper. That is a more than usable pattern for 40 yards all day long. For a lead 4 and for a Remington shell, that's a pretty decent core area. But as soon as you get outside of that turkey paper, it kind of just goes sporadically all over the place. So there's definitely a little bit of a trade-off there. You have a nice core, but a much more sporadic outer edge, which doesn't always lend itself to being a pattern that gives you a little bit of leeway. Sure, we see some leeway, but if you're off of that bird just a little bit farther, you may very well not even hit him at all, or take out another bird that could be close to him because you've got pellets kind of flying all over the place around the edges. So at the end of the day, that's far from the worst pattern we've seen out of a Remington shell. That might actually be one of the better patterns we've gotten out of them by a long shot, but it's still far from perfect at the same time. If we could keep that general core area looking like that, but just tune in some of those wild flyers around the edges, that would be a pretty nice turkey shell. But clearly, it's still a Remington shell that definitely has some flaws, that's for sure. But as always, leave your thoughts in the comments. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested this combo, or the Remington Premier turkeys, or the Avian-X, or whatever the case might be? And if so, what has been your results with it? Would you hunt with that pattern? It's clearly good enough. It's got a nice core, but the outer edges leave a lot to be desired. So would you hunt with it, or would you want to see it a little bit more consistent and a little more tuned in than that? Leave all your thoughts down in the comments. I definitely wouldn't be scared to use it if it's what I had, but again, I think I would want to test a couple more shells of it through that combo just to see how consistent those outer edges are before I take it out in the woods. But that's still a plenty good enough turkey pattern at the end of the day here. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description down below if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.